All right. So if we've talked about Vygotsky and you're having questions or can't remember about, there are two big things that I talk about all the time. One is zone of proximal development. So if you think about it like a Zorro's Z, like down here is what a child can do with no help at all. So without your help at all, this is what a child can do. And way up here is what a child can do with the most amount of help in the world, which we don't always have because there are 20 children in a room. So if you could give them the most help that was ever available in the world, it would be up here. That Z, that Zorro Z, that in between, that's where we teach. We teach in that in between all the time. And so one of the teaching practices that we use to move children within that zone of proximal development up is scaffolding. And so scaffolding, you can think of like building scaffolding, where we put it up and we help the children. You use it to build the building, but then you take it down. So the idea is that children aren't going to need that scaffolding forever. And so when you get a broken leg, you don't have a cast and crutches forever. You use them until your leg is strong enough that you don't need them anymore. Think about the process for learning to ride a bike. And so we start not with a 10-speed bike. We start with probably a scooter with no pedals that we just push with our feet. And then when we get good at that, we move to a tricycle. And then we move maybe to a big wheel or a bigger tricycle. I often find it funny that the children always pick the tricycle that's just a little bit too big for them in the gym, and that's the one they want to try to pedal. Okay, so then we go to a bike that has training wheels. And so you have training wheels for a while, and you have a bike where you can reach the ground. And so we're providing just enough help, just enough scaffolding that the child is safe and as successful as possible when they're learning how to do this skill. So then we're going to move that up. And maybe now I have a bike that doesn't have training wheels, but do we just turn a child loose? No. Usually we're running along behind them and we're holding to the back of the seat until they get started, and then they're going to go. Maybe they start with one pedal completely up and one down so they get a really good push off when they're first learning. And so scaffolding is that support that I can provide as a teacher so that you can be successful. And so I'm going to provide just enough support so that you're successful with the ultimate goal of you not needing me anymore to be successful. And so eventually when our children are going to kindergarten, there are things that they don't need our help with anymore. If you think back with all the things that we intentionally teach children how to do, from zipping to tying to feeding themselves, I've had children come in who didn't know how to drink out of a cup yet. And so these are all things that we work on and we scaffold until they can be successful, with the ultimate goal being that they don't need us anymore. So if you have a small group activity and I say, what scaffolding do you have in place yet? I'm going to look and see. Often I see this with scissors. I think teachers maybe don't always remember, understand the progression of learning how to cut. And so if I'm struggling with cutting paper, I need to think about as a teacher, what do I know is easier than cutting paper? Oh, I'm going to roll some Play-Doh, and I'm going to snip, 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 because snip is a step before cutting with scissors. And so snip, 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 snip is way easier. I'm going to have some straws and we're going to snip, snip, snip the ends of straws off. And then I'm going to save those because we're going to string them later because we're still working on fine motor. But what am I doing so that all those children are successful? And maybe it's that I'm with them with my hands over top, helping them. Maybe I'm singing open, shut them, so we learn how to open and shut. Maybe for some children, we talk about the scissors being an alligator and we're going to take a bite out of the paper. Open, chomp, open, chomp, and we're going to chomp and bite that paper as we cut our way through. Maybe I cut some fringe for them and they get to whack the trim off, the fringe off the edge, which is an easier skill than just cutting. Think about all the different kinds of paper you tried to cut in your life. Have you ever bought cheap Christmas wrapping paper and it's horrible to cut and it rips into tears and it's super frustrating? Imagine that when you're 3. And so think about, what can I do so that the children are successful? Um, we do these things all the time. If they can't reach the water fountain, one, it's nice if we can get a second one that's the right height for our age group, but often we're in old elementary buildings. And so we put up a little step stool so that they can reach. What are we doing so the children can be successful? Maybe they need a different type of scissors. Maybe they need to sit by me at lunch so they can be successful. Maybe they need to be This one is tiny, but think about how hard it is to pour milk. So I'm little and this milk is really heavy. So if I spill the milk every day when I pour it, I'm not going to give that child the milk first. I'm going to give that child the milk towards the end so there's less milk so that it's not as heavy, so it's easier to pour. And I'm also going to tell that child, you can stand up if you want, because if you stand up to pour when you're little, it helps you pour more easily. And so what can I do to make that child successful? What kind of support can I give them so that they can do this activity eventually without my help or guidance?